So this technique, basically input-output redirection to files, printers, keyboards, can be achieved on the command line, and that's something that I try to demonstrate to you, like using our little program so far. Okay, formatted output, like I told you, basically includes this. Just using this symbol means formatted output. So let's take a look at the example right here. Right here we're using three variables: integer I, double D, and boolean B. Okay, so we set them to 7, 8, 9, 0.5, and true. So the output that we're trying to generate is something like this. So we say cout display integer, display semicolon, display double, display semicolon, and then displaying the Boolean value. So the outcome of this is this, right? So we say 7, 8, 9, 0.5, and true, separated by semicolons. So let's try something like this in our code and just mention a few things regarding this type of output. So for now, I will remove the line that does unformatted output with the put member function. And instead, I will just try to replicate what we've done there. So we just say this is integer value. This will be the double value, and we'll set it to 0.5, just like in that code. And also the Boolean variable, Boolean B value, right, equals true, for example, or false. And we'll try to display them three of them in a row like this, and we'll say let's display I value, D value, and B value, and just see what happens if I proceed in this manner. Oh, I mistyped right here. I meant to type D value, so let's rebuild this one. And you see what happens, interestingly, is that by default, so this is the output that I get here, right? So initial output looks like this. Right. So of course, integer is expected to be displayed as 65. Then the double value is formatted as expected, 0.5 with the decimal point, fractional point. But Boolean true gets converted to 1. If we change it to a false and build it, then if we run it, you see that the false is converted to a 0. So by default, when we use Boolean values to display them, cout converts them to 0 and 1. This is sort of like following the mode of the fact that if I want to use an integer int flag of some kind, and I want to initialize it with Boolean result B value, right, which is a Boolean. This is a Boolean value right here, so this is false or true. Then inside this integer, the result will be that false will be converted to 0, right? 0 equals false, and 1 equals true. So it's not an issue to convert Boolean value to an integer. And cout sort of like follows this convention of essentially, in our case, promoting Boolean value to an integer. And in case of this promotion, this is the rules that are being set. False becomes integer 0, and true becomes integer 1, right? So if we want to convert, actually, if we want to make cout display false or true for booleans, then we need to use the manipulator. And this manipulator, as you can see, this manipulator is called Boolean alpha. Essentially use alphabetical display of true and false. So if I use it here, if I use this manipulator, this is called manipulator because what it does, it signals cout that I want some special action. For example, divert from default display of 0 and 1 for booleans to actually convert them to true or false. For manipulations like Boolean and alpha, I need to include another header. Input output manipulators. There's a header that brings in all sorts of manipulators from there. So if I do this, rebuild the program and run it, then one second. Okay, I'm running it right here. Okay, I just managed two different screens and I didn't realize that it was happening on my other screen. So anyway, this is the output that I'm getting right now. And you can see that the previously 0 now is being displayed because of this manipulator. The false, initial false setting of b value was converted to false when it came out on the output device on my screen. All right, so just an example of manipulator. Those are like used sometimes for debugging, sometimes when values are saved in the file. But other types of manipulators are useful, like for instance, you can say use hexadecimal format, for instance, to display integers. Okay, so you see how hexadecimal value is now being used to display it. Let me do it 3 times in a row. If I run it, you see that this time a hexadecimal 65 is no longer displayed. Instead, what gets displayed is 3 times in a row, I display hexadecimal version of 61, which is 41 hexadecimal. And then if I remove this manipulator from the two lines over here, so the version of output of my integer looks like this. The first time I convert it to hexadecimal and I display it, I get this. But if then I display them again 2 times, the hexadecimal format, it becomes stuck. So if I rebuild this, you see that I run it again and I still get 3 of the 41s. So if I want to switch back to a decimal format, I need to use manipulator decimal to say now I want to switch back to decimal format. So look what happens this time. If we run it, then this is what we get. The first time 41 is printed, and the second 2 times we print 65. Okay, so this is what we get as output right here. We get first time we get the hexadecimal version of our integer, and then we say no, we no longer want one hexadecimal and want to switch to decimal. So sometimes I program it like this. If I just want to switch to hexadecimal just once, I would do it this way, right? I just basically say, okay, let's switch to hexadecimal display this integer, and then switch back to the default, which is the decimal output. Okay, so that's the way I would probably write this code, just to wrap my integer by hex and decimal around to be able to produce the desired output if I want to display just once. Okay, so that's the idea. So these manipulators, of course, are extremely popular, just very, very popular manipulators, because of course sometimes you want to display hexadecimal values, and of course a lot of times you want to display just a plain decimal values. So for instance, if I wanted to display this double value in its hexadecimal form, what I would do, you know, we have to convert this to perhaps a couple of integers, and then be able to display them individually. So it would require a little bit of programming, because by default you see that hexadecimals just displayed as a normal. I'm sorry, the floating point numbers are displayed by just with the, you know, with the value with the floating point format.